Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to tonight's community forum with Rick Braziel. I'm Nancy Newton. I'm the city manager for Springfield, and with me today is Assistant City Manager Neil Ladati. And also you will see on your screen our law enforcement consultant, Rick Braziel. I'm going to say a few remarks and then I'm going to turn it over to Neil, and then Rick will begin his portion of the discussion. So first of all, I just want to say we're trying something new here tonight, and so we may have some technology glitches. As all of you know that have been doing these in any online meetings, we can have disruptions. So I'm asking for some patience as we go through this process. But I thought it was important to give the opportunity for the community to let their feelings be known to Mr. Braziel and provide input and comment. So we're doing this. As you see on the slide, the meeting is being recorded. And so I just wanted to make you aware of that. If you feel uncomfortable giving testimony, or not testimony, but commenting on the virtual platform, you can also contact Mr. Braziel, and the Gmail address is on the screen. I will say it out loud for those listening. It's rbc.springfield@gmail.com. And because we are recording this and we don't have any control over who might be listening, I ask that people be respectful to each other tonight and use appropriate language when giving their comments. And that we also focus our comments and our attention on the evening of July 29th. This is the Thurston protest that Mr. Braziel is investigating currently. And I think that would be helpful if we could try to keep our focus there. And one final thought is we will going to do a hard stop at 7:30. So we will try to, a little bit before then, start wrapping up the comments, and hopefully we will try to get to people quickly. So I'm going to turn things over to Neil, who is going to talk about the process, and then Rick will give his own introduction. So Neil.
Great, thank you, Nancy, and thanks everyone for joining us. I already see a lot of names that are very familiar, so we appreciate your time. We're going to do this a little bit differently than our typical council meeting if you're used to it. So there is a hand raise button that you should see in the kind of the forum where your name is popping up. We'd like you to click the hand raise if you'd like to speak, and then that will give us an easy way to keep people in order by how they raise their hands. So if you could try that, if you would like to speak, please click the raise your hand button. And after Rick gives a brief introduction, we'll go through the list. I'll call your name or whatever you've used to identify yourself, and we'll make sure your microphone is unmuted. And then you'll have the floor, and we'll have 3 minutes. We'll have a timer that pops up. If we have any issues with audio or anything like that, we'll do whatever we can to work through it.
Okay, thank you, Neil.
Yeah.
Rick, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, your investigation process, and then I think you'll turn it over to Neil to start guiding questions, and I'm going to pop down.
Perfect, thank you very much. And again, this is new for everybody. Usually this is done in person, so it's unfortunate I can't see everybody's faces, but we'll kind of work through this. So many of you may have looked at my background already, but I wanted to give you a quick summary. So I 33 years in a police department in California, Sacramento, the last 5 as chief. After retiring, I've spent the last almost 8 years now doing critical incident reviews, mainly for the National Police Foundation out of Washington, D.C. Those include several mass shootings in the country, some bombings, also done some reviews of protests and riots, both in California and in Oregon, as well as other jurisdictions in the Midwest, Ferguson, Missouri being the biggest one. And then I've been doing, in those last 7.5 years, a lot of officer-involved shootings and deaths in custody, as well as policy reviews. So the best way to kind of describe how I do things is I start out with a review like this in Springfield, and basically I understand I don't know what I don't know. So I can be that annoying 5-year-old that's constantly asking the city and others, you know, why do we do it this way in Springfield? Why do we do things? Because again, I don't know what I don't know, so I'm constantly asking questions and grabbing information. So the request of the city so far has been through all the reports involving the incident, all the videos, all the emails, any audio, and not just the incident itself, but events leading up to this incident, which includes some of the other demonstrations and marches before, because I look at things, events that occurred prior to, during the 29th incident, and then after, because I'm looking for not just things that we see, not just symptoms, but potential causes. And in doing so, what we do is we take an approach that looks at how do we, it's an improvement approach. So it's how do we do things better? And the best way to describe that is if you think of your favorite sport, doesn't matter what your favorite sport is, basketball, baseball, hockey, golf, it doesn't matter, equestrian, the best of the best, always look at the game film to figure out how to do it better next time. So that's the approach I take. It is Monday morning quarterbacking, quite candidly. I wasn't there. I wasn't part of the events. So I'm actually looking at things from a retrospective perspective. Video is one of my biggest tools. Right now, I'm at 294 videos that have either been submitted to me by some of you, maybe here that are listening, some other community members, videos the police department has provided, and those that I've gone out and found on my own. So right now we're about 294 videos, and I'm still receiving them and still finding them. This review right now, I'll take your input this evening. I also, after this, will be doing some interviews within the city. The tentative completion date, I say tentative, the goal is to get this done by January 31st. But again, I don't know what I don't know. So there may be something that either speeds up the review or maybe stalls it slightly. But I will be communicating with the city manager about that. But tonight, my role in this is just to listen. It really is to sit back and listen, take notes. You'll see me looking down, writing, typing, doing those. If for some reason the city manager mentioned that if you don't feel comfortable speaking, you don't have time, please send me an email. I've already gotten many emails. Some folks have wanted to send videos and or audio files. You can do that. If the files are too big, send me an email and we'll work out how to establish a share drive that's unique to you, between you and me. And then you can provide and share those videos or audios with me at a later date. With that, Neil, I'm just ready to listen.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rick. And so we've had a few folks join us since you started, just with your intro. And I'll just remind folks, we're going to use the raise your hand button today to get folks in the queue, and we've already had several. And if you don't see it or if you've never used it before, it is the button that is, you'll see a microphone button, and then the next button down is a raised hand. So if you do that, it's going to put folks in order so everyone can speak in the order they raised their hand. So Rick, if you're ready, the first person we have in the queue is Stacy Holt. And Stacy, you should be able to unmute your microphone.
Is that on?
We can hear you.
Hi. Okay, I'll speak fast. First and foremost, I would like to state that I have not come forward publicly until now because I have seen what Black Unity and BLM protesters right here on our area do to people that say anything at all against their movement. I've personally witnessed and have evidence of the harassment and doxing they do to people, and I personally know people that have lost their jobs as a result of doxing. I want it on record that if I am doxed or harassed as a result of my testimony today, I will use all legal resources available to me. As a member of the Thurston community that lives near Jessie Main Park, you can imagine my surprise when I heard that Black Unity was planning to march in our streets to protest a veterans' Halloween decorations that have literally been up for years. Most concerning to me was a conversation in the Thurston Neighborhood Watch Facebook group where a community member was attempting to reason with the protesters that were bringing this to our community over false accusations of racism. And even after explaining that they were wrong about the decorations with facts, they continued their agenda to terrorize our neighborhood. I'm providing you with screenshots of the conversation I am referring to in a follow-up email, as well as a screenshot of their flyer for the protest, which was clearly targeted at this veteran. That night, I arrived at Jessamine Park early and sat on a bench waiting for the protesters to arrive. I overheard conversation amongst the fake medics about weapons and watched as other members arrived with riot gear. I've submitted comment about my experience in the park already, so I will not waste any time repeating that here, but many community members were scared because of this protest, especially the children and elderly. This was expressed to me directly by community members. Since the focus on the investigation is based on the false accusations that police used excessive force and worked with the counter-protesters, I think it's important to note that as a perceived counter-protester myself, the group of people I was standing with was asked to clear the street and stay out of the way by officers a couple times. So not only were we not working with them, but SPD was also ensuring that Black Unity was allowed their space to march. It wasn't until Black Unity chose to charge the barriers that the protest turned ugly, and that's on Black Unity. They could and should have stopped at that barricade and not attempted to enter the highway. They had other choices. They chose violence. To expect to be able to charge the barrier without a response from the police is ludicrous. Actions have consequences, and SPD did a fine job that night and, in my opinion, minimized risk to our community by their actions. It could have been a whole lot worse. I have a lot more to say on this subject, but time prevents that, so I will follow up with a copy of my testimony and additional information. I also have video from that protest that is not posted anywhere publicly. I also took video of all the protesters' vehicles that day. Notably, many of them came from out of town. If SPD would like copies of my documentation from the event, they can request it and I will gladly provide it. Thank you for your time today, and thank you, SPD, for protecting our community against domestic terrorists.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you. If you have information you would like to send to Rick, and you can see his Gmail account there, we would appreciate you sending him that information. The next speaker is Steve Molnar. Steve, you should be good. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Rick, thank you for your time as well. I did email you, but I wanted to recap what I actually had said earlier. I wanted to discuss with you guys the disruptive and lawless behavior that was exhibited by members of a group identified as Black Unity that occurred on July 29th, 2020. I'm a resident of Thurston and live only a few blocks from the park where this event occurred. A few days prior to the event, social media posts from Black Unity indicated that they would be coming back, and I'm quoting, and that their goal was to be, quote, disruptive as possible in our neighborhood, where we live and raise our kids. I have attached a copy of their social media and I sent it to Rick earlier in a different email. If it was clear, based on their social media post, was to invade our quiet residential neighborhood and cause as much disruption and chaos and anarchy as possible. What did they expect was going to happen when they showed up? We worked hard, we pay our taxes and have the right to raise our kids without the fear of rage mobs threatening our peace and safety. What exactly was their intent? If it was to completely destroy any semblance of empathy for whatever cause they professed to represent, they succeeded beautifully. What they did accomplish was anger an entire neighborhood with their antics. In a summer racked by violence, arson, looting, and riots in Portland by groups such as Black Unity, it's not rocket science to see that bringing that garbage to our neighborhood wasn't the brightest idea. Who are they to infringe on our right to live in peace? Who are they to invade our neighborhood, scaring our kids? I'm a fire medic and I was deployed in California on a large wildfire. My wife called me and was very upset and scared that this group was coming to our neighborhood specifically to cause harm and unrest. I was livid and beyond frustrated that I couldn't be home to help her and call my 3 kids. Why should we have to worry about that at all? Period. I'm utterly amused that Thurston and its residents have been labeled as racist and white supremacists ad nauseum for standing up and not tolerating this behavior in our neighborhood. It's especially ludicrous in that the vast majority of Black Unity protesters were a bunch of white kids who were intent on creating chaos for chaos' sake. It is not okay to hide behind the banner of racial justice or to behave in a lawless, disruptive manner. We will not tolerate that in Thurston. And I also want to make it clear, very, very clear, that we unequivocally support our police department and our officers in Springfield. They did exactly what we expected them to do. They were restrained, professional, and finally intervened when they had to. In fact, our whole neighborhood came out and backed them as they drove these idiots out. We love our cops. They are not replaceable. To be sure, the city council and mayor certainly are. How many tax dollars were spent as a direct result of this violent protest? Should Springfield residents have to waste tax dollars on these anarchists coming to our community? I don't think so. Look, I strongly support our Constitution. You want to protest? Awesome. Don't bring that crap to our neighborhoods. This was not a peaceful event, and it was advertised specifically as not being peaceful. Make no mistake, if they return with that intent behavior, they will be run off again, period. Thank you very much for your time.
Rick, our next speaker is David Ledbetter. And David, your microphone is on.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so I would just like to say start by saying I attended the protest as a protester. I went with some basic first aid gear. I've got some first aid training, so my goal was just to make sure nobody got hurt. I don't care whose, quote unquote side they're on. I just wanted to make sure that, everyone went home okay. So as we started the march, within about 20 minutes, the police had barricaded off, saying that they did not want us to get to Main Street. I do want to make it clear that Main Street was a good 4 or 6 blocks down from where we were at. I won't comment on Black Unity's choice to walk through the barricades. They did not attempt to use any force to move the officers out of the way. They just simply attempted to walk through the barricade. After that, that was when I spent the rest of the day attempting to apply first aid to people, as one woman who was dragged back to me as I was a little bit far away from the police line. A woman who was dragged back to me was having trouble staying conscious. I did see her get hit several times in the face and head from police officers. We ended up having to get her out of the area in just a citizen's vehicle. There were a couple other injuries that I had to treat that day. There was a concussion. A man was severely bleeding from his head. After that, there were a couple scrapes and bruises. I'm not a doctor, so I wanted to stay within my practice. So the scrapes and bruises I was trying to treat, the biggest obstacle I found was there was nowhere safe to treat these bruises. Anytime I tried to sit a patient down, we were accosted and attacked by, I would hate to say, I'm going to say white supremacists, and I know that is going to bring up a lot of feelings from a lot of the people listening. However, I was physically attacked several times at this protest. I looked to the police for help, and I watched several turn their backs. Anytime there was a confrontation, I did see the police, for example, there was a man with a bat threatening a woman. The police officer thought it was safest to turn his back on the man with the bat threatening the woman, and instead try to calm the woman who was being assaulted down. After that, we were marched over towards Dogwood into a group of people who were waiting. There was a man stabbing people with a sharpened American flag. There are several pictures of that that have been documented. I really haven't much else to say other than I witnessed a lot of preferential treatment from the police towards the counter protesters. There's more I can say, and I'll send that in an email, because I am worried about retaliation. I have seen folks sort of sniffing around my neighborhood lately since I've come out and started speaking publicly about this. So I'll send the rest in a private email. Thank you for your time.
Rick, our next speaker is Dwayne Esparum. Dwayne, if you want, you should be good to go.
Well, good evening, Officer Rick. My name is Dwayne Esparum. I'm president of Springfield Neighborhood Watch Organization. We're a nonprofit. We have about 35 neighborhood watch organizations throughout the city. I have 2 watch groups in the Thurston area. And what I'm here to speak about is basically from what I've heard from my watch groups members, that they were very pleased the way the Springfield Police Department handled the protest situation. This was a residential neighborhood and a park, and things were, well, as again, it was known, as previously stated, that it was known to be a non-peaceful protest for the most part. And so I guess I'm just putting that input out there in regard to Neighborhood Watch, that for the most part, our watch groups are feeling positive about our police department. I was down at one of the protests at the library, and I saw some things going on there. However, I do commend the police department and the way they let the protesters speak and do their thing. And I think they did a great job. So really, I won't waste your time belaboring that. So thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Iris Bixler.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Iris.
Thank you. I attended the Black Unity Rally in Thurston on July 29th in support of Black Lives Matter. I was horrified to witness the violent, angry hatred of the counter-protesters and the apparent collusion with the Springfield Police Department. I'm disgusted with Springfield Police Department's excessive use of force on peaceful protesters. Their brutality left many, including a family member of mine, requiring hospital attention. Recently, I have left several messages and emails with Springfield City Manager Nancy Newton, as well as Rick Braziel, requesting a meeting, and am disappointed in the lack of response. I have requested a private conversation because discussing the events of July 29th in a public space is neither safe, because one can only assume that those who want to do protesters harm will be listening tonight, nor legally advised by an attorney. Additionally, this type of platform is both nerve-wracking and traumatic, especially for people of color. In my professional work life, I often speak publicly to large groups. Even with my experience, I know my voice is shaking tonight. I implore you to find a safe way for people to speak to you privately in a trauma-informed format. One last thing before I yield the rest of my time. I want to express my gratitude to all the Black leaders in our community. I value you and want you to know that I see your pain, I hear your call to action, and I am personally committed to doing the work of dismantling white supremacy and a system of racial injustice. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Rick, is Anya Dobrowalski.
Good. Great. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Anya.
Okay, great. I was having some problems with my audio before the first time I signed on. I'm sorry I don't have a really well-prepared statement, but I believe that probably my the letter that my partner and I sent to the city manager's office will be shared with you. But just kind of a recap, my partner, who's an emergency room nurse, and I were pretty much at the front line at that protest and did not see anyone breach the barrier for quite a while before SPD actually breached it and opened it up and moved through themselves. When we first approached the barrier, there were some people who tried to get through to talk with sorry, I'm a little nervous, with SPD to negotiate with them. SPD wouldn't let them through. Everybody backed off. I think the prime example of that is, or the real evidence of that is that nobody was actually arrested for breaching the barrier. Everybody who was arrested was dragged through the barrier. And yeah, I guess it's just super disappointing, but it wasn't something I didn't. Sorry, my dog's going nuts with her toy right now. Stop it. So it was, I had attended several BU protests previously and had seen SPD's behavior escalating over the course of the summer. And so when we drove to Springfield that night for that protest, which was legal, in which we didn't start any violence, we were just loud, which is our right. We were really nervous. We were super nervous, and we were wondering when was the night that SPD was going to start beating on us. So we were wondering when was the night that they were going to permit counter protesters who we'd encountered, who had been threatening us for a while, to start beating on us. And that was the night. That was the night. My partner, like I mentioned, he's an emergency room nurse. He took care of a woman who was bleeding really profusely from her face after having been basically cold cocked by a cop. And it was we watched video of it. He pushed her. She pushed back on his nightstick, and then he just punched her in the face. And to me, that's just kind of emblematic of that night, and it's super disappointing, and I'm really sad that this is how our tax dollars are spent. And yeah, I guess that's it. Sorry I wasn't more prepared.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Rick, is J.R. Arthur. And J.R.
Good evening, Rick. It's great to meet you. I'm thankful that you have experience in the police services. I want to begin by sharing with you that I've been a resident in Lane County for 30 years and a member of the Springfield Chamber of Commerce, and I love the community of Springfield for so many reasons. As a retired teacher, I'm now working internationally with an organization that works exclusively in the former CS countries. I work in the country of Belarus, the former Soviet Republic. Rick, I don't know if you have been watching the news, but they are having peaceful protests over there. And the police officers there are actually beating mercilessly, and even some people I know over there have been killed on the street by police officers. Many have been incarcerated by just being near the protests, and some of the people I know have been sent to re-education centers. I'm so thankful I don't live in Belarus. You know, context is king. Sometimes we take for granted what we have in this wonderful country. And I want to ask you to review the films very, very carefully, as I have, and you'll notice that there were commands by our police not to breach the barricade, not to approach, as it would lead to one of the most dangerous streets in the city of Eugene. In fact, you may take note that it was just a few days after the protest that there was a young man killed on that very street right close to where that protest took place. You know, context is so important. When I had interactions with police officers 3 times in Belarus, all of them were terrifying. And all of them had to do with being in a car and stopped by a police officer with an AK-47 and finding out that I was an American. They basically told me that if I did not want to go to their prison, that we would have to pay money. 2 times we paid the money. 1 time we were with a government official, and the police officer walked away fearful that he would be put in prison. We live in an amazing country. I've worked closely with many of the officers in Springfield, and I have found that all of those I've worked with are men of integrity, men who are professional, women who stand up and serve our community well. So I asked the questions. Did the protesters have a permit to protest? Did they give them a plan of where they would protest? Did the protesters follow the commands that were clearly stated by the police officers not to breach the barrier? My question is, if you go looking for a bloody nose and you get one, why are you there? You got what you deserved. Thank you very much.
Rick, our next speaker is Wang. And if you unmute your microphone.
You hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, thanks for your time. SPD's police brutality against BIPOC Black Lives Matter protesters on July 29th have brought unhealed racial oppression trauma to persons of color in Springfield and the Eugene areas, regardless if we were there or not. Especially SPD police brutality has not been held accountable after over 4 months. As a person of color, I was luckily not at the July 29th protest in Thurston to be heard directly by white supremacists and Springfield police. I watched the online videos from different angles. demonstrating how SPD officers Emerson hit the BIPOC protesters' head by using motorcycle gloves with hard knuckles when they were already put down on the ground without any resistance. What kind of training did Officer Emerson receive from SPD to do this unnecessary cruel hit? I held my fear and anger till the next day and called SPD on July 30th to file a complaint. I haven't received any follow-ups from SPD since then. I'm glad we're having this opportunity to conduct an investigation to address SPD well-known brutality behavior against BIPOCs. Springfield should not have to wait so long till the traumatic event happened on July 29th. It is late as SPD has already caused physical and emotional damage to BIPOC community. It is also not too late to hold SPD accountable to rebuild a safe environment for BIPOC community. So Springfield, we're watching you to put your real effort to make a change. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rick. Our next speaker is anonymous. And you'll just need to unmute your microphone. I'm sorry, the name used is LOA last name. There we go.
Yeah, so I mostly just wanted to check from, I watched when you were addressing City Council earlier and then your remarks today. As far as I understand it, your scope in the investigation is specifically the SPD response to the events on the ground. So I won't go into any particulars about protester or counter-protester activity. I just wanted to bring up that, like, I think the main thing that I'm looking for you in from you in this particular dialogue is it sounds like you're mostly talking about being process oriented, the Monday morning quarterbacking, going back and looking at how things can be improved, which is an understandable approach. I would just like some reassurance that if and when malfeasance is found, that individuals who were operating outside of maybe not necessarily by what new standards would be, but that any officers who are found to have been assaulting protesters or been acting unlawfully or unreasonably are going to be specifically held accountable. And I feel that in setting up new protocols for officers to follow to prevent things from happening in the future, it's going to be necessary for the community writ large to trust that those will be implemented fairly and correctly, that any officers who are found to have done something outside of their job description, and particularly if it's violating the rights of people exercising their right to assemble, to protest, etc., that they'll be held responsible for that in some way. And I'll yield my time.
Thank you. The next speaker, Rick, is Tim Davis. Tim, you'll just need to unmute your microphone on your side. And we can hear you.
Hello?
Tim, your microphone is unmuted. You're ready to go.
Of course, that is their biggest card. Okay. Hi. I'm no white racist who sees BLM and Antifa winning the same claim. Of course, that is their biggest card to play, and it is way overplayed and used up. Anyone who stands against them and stand for the truth are called racist, their go-to word. However, I'm an American patriot. I will not be intimidated. I see reality. Do not fear standing for the truth. For one thing to say, the police acted out of line is outrageous. The day the BLM Antifa invaded Thurston neighborhood was not just a simple protest protected under our Constitution. These people came to intimidate and harass homeowners, hardworking American families and their children in their homes trying to simply live their lives unmolested by invaded forces come to sow fear. And that's exactly what they intend to do. There's no constitutional right to stand out in front of my home or anyone's home and scream, "Fuck the police, death to the police." If anything, if this is true, they are sadly mistaken. It is past time good men and women stood together and put a stop to these intimidation tactics the left wing of treason are using. It is past time to call them what they are true, what they claim of all who dare stand against them. They are truly domestic terrorists, and one day all will come to understand this. There is a growing and lawful movement of good men and women, not only in our valley, but all across the USA, that have grown tired of watching our history and our way of life thrashed and trashed by lies and threats, assault and destruction. Anyone with half a brain that has watched with open eyes understands what's going on. See Portland, Oregon, and Kate Brown's reign of destruction allowed and encouraged. Portland, Oregon will not be the fate of Springfield. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. We the people will not stand down, and we will not back down to these criminal thugs' intimidation and threats.
Our next speaker, Rick, is Don Delaney. And Don, if you'll unmute the microphone from your side, you should be good to go.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. So I just really want to just take a moment just to thank everybody who's spoken tonight, and having this platform to be able to have a way for us to express, whether we're for this, against this, I'm not sure. But I just wanted to say, I'm so glad to live in a democracy. I'm so glad that we live in a democracy where we can have this forum, where we can have this platform, where we can express these views, whether you agree with them or not. It doesn't matter. The point is that I came here tonight with an open mind, because really, I don't know very much about what happened. It was a blur for me. There was protests in Portland, there was protests in Thurston, there was protests in Eugene. I lost my job twice. I was in a really bad point when all of this was going on. But I just wanted to come on and just say that I love this community. I love every part of this community. And whatever we have to do to make it right, I want to do that. I don't know what that is. I don't know what to do, where to go, what's best. But I just wanted to thank everyone for whatever you do. If you're a doctor, if you're a police officer, if you work in mental health, if you are just listening and you are unemployed, I don't care. I'm just glad you're here. And that's all I wanted to say. I'm just glad that I have this forum, and we live in this country that we can do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Our next speaker is Richard Elsey.
Yes.
Go ahead, Richard.
Yes. I'm a very proud United States Air Force veteran. My wife and I raised 4 children up on South 70th Street in Thurston. And I have friends who have their children and their grandchildren who still live up in that area. Black Unity, which is just a spin-off name for Black Lives Matter. We're up there not to peacefully protest as they allege that they're there to do. If they were there to be peacefully protesting, why do they wait until long after dark up in a relatively secluded neighborhood to start raising hell, creating chaos? If you look and read their advertisements coming up that before this event, when they were announcing to come up there, their intention was not to make their position known or to argue their point or to peacefully protest. They went up there with the intention of raising hell, creating chaos, and creating fear in the neighbors and the people that lived up in that neighborhood. Completely unacceptable. The police let them go for a little while until they made a decision. They do not want them to go any further because, yeah, they may have been a block or two away from Main Street, but you can't wait until the very end until you put up a blockade, because look no further than what they did at that blockade there. They say that that was peaceful. They say that they did not assault the police or try to bust through that barricade. I'm certain that you have plenty of video. The investigator has plenty of video showing the reality of what happened. My understanding and from personal experience and personal belief, because I was up there, I am the gentleman that had the American flag flying on a bamboo flagpole. That pole is not sharpened. I will be submitting to you video and visual evidence to prove that that was not a sharpened stick. It is an American flagpole. I love bamboo, therefore I fly it and I can raise that stick high. To have the propaganda and have a flat out lie, slanderous lie against me that I had a sharpened pole that I was poking people with. If that were the case, I would be sitting in the hokey right now. And I'm not. The Springfield police, in my opinion, exercised phenomenal restraint against people who were there to create chaos, create hell. I know one of my friends who still lives up there, still has his grandkids come and visit them regularly, about 2 blocks from where this took place. They had one of their neighbors, and he heard this, where they threatened to rape his neighbor's wife, and kill their dog. Now, tell me what part of that is peaceful. None of it is. And I hope you get to the bottom of this and stop the propaganda that's being exposed, lies about the Springfield Police Department. Thank you.
Rick, the next speaker is Thomas Lawrence. And Thomas, I think you're muted on your side. Are you hearing us, Thomas? Okay, we're going to leave Thomas in the queue. We'll go to the next one and we'll come back to Thomas. Let's see, Kyle Smith is our next speaker.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Kyle.
Hey, I've lived in Springfield my whole life, and that's 30 plus years. And I'm just going to say that people are tired of being called white supremacists and racists for having differing political views. It's overplayed, and people are sick of it. We're tired of the race card being played. If anybody disagrees with these people, if anybody counter protests them, if you put up any sort of different view than them, you're a white supremacist and a Nazi. It's tiring, and people are sick of it. Groups like Black Unity marched all summer long with Antifa members who they allowed in their group to terrorize neighborhoods. We saw what happened in Eugene in May, where they bashed small businesses and big businesses, even Starbucks, businesses that support their causes. They break the windows out, spray paint stuff, and destroy private property. And groups like Black Unity have allowed Antifa members to march right alongside with them, and they don't ever do anything about it. They let them run amok. Portland cops literally got ran out 2 days ago up in Portland, got ran out, and now Antifa, who are supporters of groups like Black Unity and who have marched with Black Unity, are taking over people's houses. We don't want that here in Springfield, and that's why what happened in Thurston happened. They use the name being called a white supremacist as a suppressant. They want to suppress people's voices, and that's the easiest and quickest way to do it, is call somebody a racist, white supremacist when nobody I know of up in Thurston is a white supremacist or racist, because we want to protect our neighborhoods and we don't want our neighborhoods terrorized. It makes us white supremacists. We're tired of it. When you're screaming obscenities 2 inches away from people's faces, Springfield police officers' faces, screaming during a pandemic 2 inches away from their face, that's peaceful. When people are afraid to come out of their houses and lock their doors when you march through their neighborhoods, that's peaceful. When you guys marched through Eugene last Friday with Black Unity march down there, and they bust people in from Portland with AR-15s, marching through the streets of Eugene with AR-15s, that's peaceful. Give me a break. That's pretty much all I gotta say.
Okay, Thomas Lawrence, we're going to try again with your microphone. You want to give it a try? Are you hearing us, Thomas? Okay. We'll come back to Thomas if we have time. The next speaker then would be Ben Christensen.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Ben.
Okay. I would like to start out by saying I was live streaming at the protest on July 29th in Thurston, Oregon. Two of the people one who assaulted me named Tim Davis at the protest, who still hasn't been held accountable by the Springfield Police Department, even after I filed a complaint, spoke earlier. He's a known white nationalist and has violence against people of color. And the other one, Richard, who talked about the flagpole, threatened to assault me that night and did assault someone right in front of me with the flagpole, and he spoke earlier today. They want to say they're not violent. Those people have histories of violence against people of color and did so that night. I'll go on with my prepared speech now. The Springfield Police Department has a long history of violence against the BIPOC community. This is never more apparent than after the start of the George Floyd protests. After the first protest that I attended, I saw the selective enforcement of the laws and it was clear. The violent white nationalists showed up at the BLM protests and were allowed to threaten, assault, and commit other acts of violence against protesters with little to no consequences from the Springfield Police Department. This culminated in Thurston on July 29th when the police used force and violence against nonviolent protesters with little to no provocation. I had at one time actually thought about being a cop. I grew up watching CSI and playing with computers, and all I wanted to do was study computer forensics and data recovery. I got the degree and the certification, and I never used it. The reason for this was because of the toxic culture that I saw in policing. I was on ride-alongs with the police, and the tactics they used when interacting with the public were lies, manipulation, intimidations, and threats. This was just unexcusable to me. This was the same behavior that we see from the Springfield Police Department. The story of why they stopped the protest has changed quite a few times from what I understand, and the versions of events that they released the next day to the media didn't match the live streams or the view of what I saw that night. I talked to the local media one time, and he said that they actually had to have a meeting to decide if they were going to release the public statement that the police made because they knew the events that they depicted were not true. This need to lie and deceive the public undermines the institution and builds a distrust in the system that is supposed to protect and serve us. But it's more sinister than this. What it does is this is used to target the most vulnerable among us, so much so that they fear the police more than the people that they're supposed to be calling the police on. This puts the most vulnerable people in our society at risk. I'm going to yield the rest of my time. Thanks.
Okay, our next speaker then would be Elizabeth Cardone. And Elizabeth, if you unmute your microphone, we'll have you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. So this isn't meant to be a racial or political banter. This is an investigation on how SPD responded, is my understanding. So I just want to make that clear. And, you know, I live less than a block from where the barrier happened. I saw neighbors or possibly people who showed up running to protest against the protesters, the Black unity that night, and certainly did not help our police officers by having people running up behind them on top of trying to secure the barricade. From what I can see and from what I witnessed, SPD did everything in their power to protect more lives by keeping them off the highway. They did not infiltrate my neighborhood. I was half a block down from where the barrier was. I did witness and see them put some people away and put them in cars. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't understand why they were here. It's a small neighborhood. Why would they come and try and uproot a small neighborhood and cause that much chaos? And SPD did everything they could to protect us and our homes and our families and our children. that night, and they kept them off the highway. Had they been on the highway, it would have been way worse. So I'm backing SPD on this one, 100%. I don't have any facts. I just have what I witnessed, and they held the line. If you're going to protest and there's a barrier and you know you're not supposed to cross it, you're signing up for getting in trouble. I mean, it's kind of obvious. I don't think anybody in this neighborhood, it was a racial thing for them. If they wanted to come and peacefully protest, that would have been one thing. But all of the media leading up to it was they were going to come and disrupt us. And so SPD came, boots on the ground, ready to defend us. 100%. And that's pretty much all I have to say.
Rick, our next speaker is Anonymous 80. And Anonymous 80, you are self-muted. If you unmute your microphone, we'll be able to hear you.
All right, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, I appreciate you. So the first thing I would like to say is that when we protest and when we block traffic, we don't block traffic to gain your support. We do it so you can see what it feels like to be stuck in a powerless situation. How do you respond to this situation? Are you calm and peaceful? Do you want to spend your years organizing political talks about it? Nope, you want to run those protesters over, kill them all. If you want to kill protesters who have you stuck in traffic, imagine what you would want to do to a system that patrols, harasses, and kills you. The sooner you learn perspective, the sooner you won't have to be stuck in traffic. That day, as we began to march, we were only 20 minutes in when we met barricades. And I say everything that I say about blocking traffic because there's a reason that we do it. It is to show you guys what it feels like to be helpless while we scream out for simple justice. In between that, when we were met with the barricade, we had done nothing. We had children with us that were marching. We had small children that were with us marching. So when they talk about all this violence and this fear and everything, we had children of our own marching with us. I had my teenage daughter that was with my group. I seen several other children there. It was a beautiful thing. And all we were doing was our normal chants. What we always do as protesters, our ways of being heard. When we were met with the barricade, it was very quick after we had begun to march. Children had to be evacuated immediately from there, our children, because of fear of the police. Beyond that, we also ended up seeing a lot of what we've referred to as Proud Boys, or however you choose to name them up. They are very violent white supremacists that have utter hate for us for some reason, just because we're begging for mercy, for lives, for Black lives to matter. Beyond that, the way the police acted, I was directly up front. I was right by Tyshawn when the assault happened, and I was standing close enough that I could hear the cop say to the other police officer, "You can go ahead and grab him now," right before they snatched at him, before they pulled him in a multitude of ways, while several protesters tried to protect him, while we were battered with batons, including me. I was hit very, very viciously in my rib cage, including a result of a drastic bruise, as well as other things that went on. But beyond that, it was them protecting what they shouldn't have protected. We have the rights to march. We have the rights to be heard. I feel like in every way, our civil rights in every single way, there's just words that I can't put to it all because it was so vicious. After we get back to our vehicles and we're met by all these angry mob of people that had machetes, had guns, had flagpoles, everything. We watched them pour juice over the generator, pull at all of our property, including speakers. One of the girls there had these mass bruises around her thighs where she was trying to hold on to one of the speakers while so many men were attacking her, trying to get that speaker from her to stop us from being heard. One of their own people in the neighborhood, Christian guy, he had a cross on that he was wearing. He came up to us and asked us, "Can we speak on the speaker, please? I need to say something." And I told him, "There's no way. We're not going to let you spew your hate right now." And he said, "No, I want to beg them to all go home." So he got on there and begged his own neighbors, "Please stop. This is not what we are about. This is not how all this is supposed to be." They completely ignored him while they continued brutalizing us, knocking one of our people down, bashing our heads open. Then after all that, I got in my car as well as one other vehicle, and we were chased out of Thurston towards Eugene, pushed off of the highway, ran at 100-mile-per-hour race through a neighborhood into a medical center. And thank God several medical personnel came running out as I, with my concealed carry, jumped out screaming at them that I couldn't handle anymore. I had my daughter in the car while being chased because I'm simply begging for our lives to matter. And we had done nothing wrong to deserve any of it. And you guys even have the video of one of the Thurston officers telling them where they could find us. What I beg of you is don't be blind to this. Truly see the hate that is spewing, let alone look at Oregon's history, let alone Thurston's history. See the truth in all of this hate that was spewed that day, and it sure wasn't with us. Like I said, we had our kids with us too. I tried to talk to some of the guys while everything was going on. And while he's screaming and yelling at me, he's saying one of his issues with us is that some of our chants included cursing. And he's telling me this while he's calling me every name in the book and degrading me to the worst means of what any man should ever do to a female, let alone a female standing there with a young girl. It was disgusting. I saw more hate in that neighborhood than I ever thought I would actually see in my lifetime. I thought I was scared of the cops. I was more scared of the people in that neighborhood with all of their machetes and rifles and screaming and cussing and breaking us down and breaking part equipment than I was even the police officers. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a quick reminder, we have several speakers left and only about a half hour. So we'd love to keep to that 3 minutes, please. Our next speaker is Elizabeth Utterback. And Liz, I think your microphone should be unmuted on our side.
Hi, Neil. I know that some of my friends had already put their name in before me. Do you want to double check that I'm next?
Yeah, you know, we're having a little glitch, but we do have all the hands up and we're going to try to get to them.
Okay. All right. I have to first acknowledge the trauma perpetuated by this forum for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, Black Lives Matter, period. And I want to remind everyone that we are discussing activities that took place on stolen land. These are not political statements. These are facts. Rick, you should know about Oregon's racial exclusion laws. You're hearing the result of these laws combined with an underfunded educational system. You've also heard from some really brave activists. I'm still shaking from the testimony from the person before me. My prepared statement is that I've been in communication with the city manager about this investigation and its scope of work. In particular, I shared concerns about the barriers that are inherent to giving comment on a public forum such as this, and the missed opportunity for individual interviews. Other community members echoed this concern during the public comment period at the city council meeting earlier this week. In reviewing the after action assessment of Ferguson that you were involved in, I see that confidential individual interviews were a key methodology of that investigation. I realize that the use of force at the Thurston protest is much different and luckily did not result in any deaths. However, because we have seen a clear pattern of selective enforcement by officers here in Springfield, I'm concerned the findings of this investigation could be biased. If cost was not a consideration, would you include individual interviews with community members in this investigation? Why or why not? Thank you.
Our next speaker is Manning Walker.
Hi. So I've lived in the Eugene and Springfield community for 10 years now, and I've worked in private security and as a medic and as a mental health crisis responder. I've worked alongside the Springfield and police departments, and I observed them operate in the field on a regular basis. I've attended many of these protests over the course of the spring and the summer, and I can confirm that there has been some selective enforcement. The BLM and Black Unity protesters have received more aggressive policing than the counter protesters who come up to protest them. Sometimes that is because counter-protesters are heavily armed and it may not be safe for officers to engage them directly. That may be a factor. I can acknowledge that. The Thurston community that was the target of that particular protest was selected because that community has a history of being hostile to its neighbors of color. I can speak from personal experience that I've been sent to that community for hostile and inappropriate calls on unhoused people and people of color who were minding their own business and behaving appropriately. Part of the context that seems to be forgotten leading up to the events of Thurston is that some of the very worst elements of our community and some of the most aggressive elements of SPD were publicly patting one another on the back and praising one another. It became apparent that that community needed to be involved in the conversation in a way that it had not been. And when I was not able to attend that night, I watched the protest on live stream. I was appalled by what I watched, and I went back and I rewatched it on several different streams later that night. From the moment they arrived in that community, the protesters who remained on the sidewalks and on the streets and did not violate people's personal property were met with hate speech, were met with threats, were met with brandished weapons, and were met with individual incidents of physical harassment. They approached the barricade. They attempted to negotiate permission to continue their march. The first individuals to cross the barricade were SPD officers. Officer Durant was the first one to reach across the barricade into the crowd and shove someone, followed shortly thereafter by punching an unarmed woman in the face. They then proceeded to do things that also violated the forced escalation ladder, including thrusting into the crowd with the butts of their batons. They drugged people across the barricades and punched them on the ground. I witnessed police officers punching unarmed people attempting to shield themselves and bouncing their heads off of the pavement. After the protesters returned back from the barricade and kettled through the neighborhood, SPD stood by while members of the neighborhood came out and assaulted, harassed, and vandalized. The policing that was involved that night was extremely biased and inappropriate, and it reinforced some of the worst ideas in our community, including ideas such as your right to speak your mind ends at the end of your own block. I yield my remaining 10 seconds.
Our next speaker is Mark Molina.
Good evening. Thank you, Nancy and Neil, for creating the forum and the platform for us. Thank you, Rick, for your expertise and your time and your willingness to listen. Thank you to all the speakers who came this evening to let us hear your perspective and to hear your voice. I wanted to say that I hope that in the end, Rick, your after actions review, the terminology will be such that it will be discernible, it will be tangible, that it will be explained in terms that will allow us as a community in every area, in every form of leadership, every organization, that we'll be able to heal and to move forward, to learn what has to be learned, where accountability must be brought forward, that accountability is indeed addressed. I've interviewed the Black Unity leaders, I've interviewed Chief Lewis, I've interviewed many of the Patriot groups, and we need to have a platform where we can contend with our issues in ways that are constructive and meaningful. I know they're hard, I know it's strenuous, I know there's a lot of growing that has to come. I believe, Rick, that you're pivotal in this, sir, and how you write your after actions review, and we're all looking to you, sir. We're all looking to you to help us navigate. We're all looking to you to help us heal. We're all looking to you to help us move forward. I want to just thank everyone who's spoken here tonight. I know there's a lot of passions and it's a very difficult experience. I want to thank you, Nancy. You're our new city manager, and you've come in the pandemic. You've come at a difficult time, and thank you for staying with us, Neil. You're our new assistant city manager. I want to thank you both for your leadership and allowing us to come together. Those that have been disciplined tonight, no one's interfering or cutting one another off. And thank you all for your passions, and thank you all for your voice. And so I just wish for all of us that once this is said and done, we can work together for the common good and help each other heal and to move forward in ways that are meaningful, engageable, and fruitful. I yield the rest of my time, Neil.
Thank you, Rick. Our next speaker is Peter Stice.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Peter.
Hello. Yeah, like you said, my name is Peter Stice. I'm a teacher here in Springfield at Hamlin Middle School. I've been involved in several Black Unity protests. I've not once seen a single act of violence at any. I was at the protest in Thurston in July. As a former resident of this neighborhood, I know the area well. The barricade was set up approximately about a quarter mile away. That's about 2 blocks away from the Highway 126 there. And when the crowd arrived at the barrier, I did not witness any violence from the protesters at all. These protests have always been super peaceful. Really just, you know, they're passionate. We're passionate about what we have to say and supporting Black lives. But I've never seen violence at any of these protests. I did not witness any violence other than the violence inflicted upon the Springfield Police Department by the Springfield Police Department. I witnessed a leader of Black Unity being dragged and hit in the head by a Springfield police officer. I was right up front at the barricade. Again, I did not see anybody cross the barricade, any of the protesters cross the barricade at all. I was one of the protesters that was right up front, so I had a very clear view. I was hit in the head with a baton after trying to block a baton that was coming down towards protesters that had actually fallen on the ground because of Springfield police officers pushing into the crowd. People had fallen down onto the ground and had struggled getting back up onto their feet. I witnessed people assisting others who were stuck underneath a heavier set police officer. I attempted to block a baton again of a police officer that was attempting to hit people that were already on the ground. With the thoughts of George Floyd that had just occurred on my mind, I didn't want anything, any serious harm to come of anybody. I didn't see any protesters cross the barrier again from my viewpoints. And you know what? You're an investigator. The rest I really had written down is really just more so fighting for Black lives, my #1 priority. And I want to thank you for your time, and I yield my last 22 seconds here. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Denise Portman.
Hi guys, thank you so much for this. I had no plans on talking. It's really only as I listen to what somebody who might be stepping into this without having any history would be looking at. I'd like to give a little preface here. My husband was very active in the biker side of our Patriot movement when we first started. And I can say honestly that the Patriots are not are not white supremacists whatsoever. The media portrayed them terribly that way. I will say that the guys, there were several bikes that were holding down the fort, we'll say at Willamette Lane, so a little boy of color could play because he had been harassed by a white supremacist. The guys who were at Thurston just right prior had been supporting a young member of our community who was being harassed. They then received word that another neighborhood in Thurston, it was actually over by Splash that night, was feeling very intimidated. They were scared Black Unity was going through those neighborhoods. They actually buttoned up from giving that young man a voice, and they proceeded to go to the Thurston neighborhood just to support the community. It was very important that that we knew the community had just people to support them. They watched on several occasions our Springfield police officers being spit at, being pushed, being harassed by members of the community who want to be a voice for a good cause. I'm not saying that what they have is bad intentions. I'm saying that our officers have been asked to jump into a bunch of piranhas that are protecting their community. One set is really trying to defend community members, trying to defend people who are frightened and afraid. The other one is trying to be a voice that's maybe chose too aggressive of a voice. I will say my husband was one of the first ones to be assaulted by a peaceful protest. They literally stopped the road. They stood in the middle, and when the motorcycles had to slow to go past them, my husband was punched in the head. Another member of the bikes had frozen water bottle thrown at his helmet, broke his helmet. They proceeded to gather around the wife. The officers at that point very respectfully got in the middle of the chaos. They didn't assault anyone. What they did was they broke everybody up. They got two groups with great intentions apart from each other, and they really were just trying to take care of both sides of the community that each group really feel very strongly and passionately about. I support my officers. I think they're amazing. I think they're doing their best with a very difficult situation with two very strong-willed groups of people who feel very passionate about what they're doing. My husband was very, very pro our officers. I recently lost him. To hear all of these people be so angry at our officers when they have done nothing but try to support all members of our community. I don't care what color they are. They have been very supportive, and I'm very proud of our officers. Thank you, SPD. Thank you guys for giving us all a voice.
Our next speaker, and just remind folks we're running a little low on time and we still have several speakers. The next speaker is SP.
Hello, can you all hear me?
We can hear you, SP.
Hi, I will try and keep this short and sweet so my brothers and sisters behind me can have a chance to speak their truth. I attended the Black Unity protest in Thurston here on July 29th that we were speaking of in support of Black Lives Matter, as I'm half Black myself. Nearly in tears now, trying to find the words to describe the hate that we were instantly met with by these community members, telling us to go back where we came from, when little do they know I grew up on the street where all of this happened. The patience that was shown to the counter protesters by Springfield Police Department was inhumane. I am a small girl. I'm barely 100 pounds. I was hit multiple times by Springfield Police Department, and I watched multiple other sisters of mine that are very small in demeanor get hit across the head by Springfield Police Department. And one of them, a beautiful young woman, dragged by her hair. I'm sorry for the shakiness of my voice, trying to describe something that has left a lot of our community traumatized for trying to do what we have a right to do, which is march peacefully in the streets. And let me tell you something, Rick. I can just tell you what I heard earlier was a counter protester making a statement that maybe somebody in Black Unity or one of the protesters made a threat that they would, I'm sorry for the trigger warning here, people, that they would rape and kill their dog. Let me tell you, these protesters are filled with nothing but love, and they are very misunderstood, and nothing like that lies in their hearts. Simply, we want justice. We don't want to be scared walking around. We don't bring violence. The only guns you see that are few and far between are for our protection. They aren't to wave in people's face and scare them. That's not what we do. That is what the counter protesters did to us. Multiple protesters were sprayed with wasp spray at an arm's length distance, myself included, in front of two Springfield police officers who said they hoped I had a water bottle and to get home safely. I hope you look at this investigation with an open mind and a sense of humanity. Rick, I yield the rest of my time.
Our next speaker is anonymous community member. And we'll try to, if you can unmute your microphone on your side.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Hi. I've been a Lane County resident for 24 years. And first, I just wanted to address a mischaracterization I heard tonight. I've just always observed that Black Unity is a peaceful protest group that's never damaged anything or assaulted anyone. And prior to the formation of the BU group, video of its future leaders actually went viral for objecting to the May property damage. So it's a mischaracterization of the group. Black Unity hold teach-ins, they do civic action, they do children's marches, and they feed the unhoused. They've done dozens of peaceful protests from June to the current day in many neighborhoods in Eugene and Springfield. Protesters that march with Black Unity live in Eugene and Springfield. Counter protesters in July 12th, down in Springfield, armed themselves with plywood shields with exposed screws, complete with hangers for wasp spray. They prevented a Black journalist from approaching the library. Shield welders attacked a man who dared to disrupt an accordion. SPD's response was to arrest the man with the accordion, not those who assaulted him. BU's response was to hold an open community forum and invite those who protested against them to talk. About a month later, BU held a protest in Thurston, and the local pharmacists and so-called patriot organizations counter-organized against it, and people from other areas. Community members knew that Black Unity channels with the homeowner on the offensive noose. BU had changed their march route so that it would no longer pass in front of the house. PD had a different idea. We've all seen the video of the officer telling the woman who live streamed her intimidations that they intended to push them on dogwood earlier that day, giving her group specific instructions of how to cut the protest. When we say white supremacists, it's not a hyperbole, including people actually convicted and imprisoned for white supremacy crimes. People posting on social media that, quote, all lives splatter, and that they were over protesters. Obviously, not all patriots are supremacists, but they have a healthy, fearful, aggressive state by white supremacist influencers. We mean some of the people who've come here tonight to spew hate, make horrible statements. Several of the people here who spoke are on film as people multiple times. The climate in the city has allowed them to feel justified. Obviously, there's a divide in. The point is that there's a public concern that there is a bias in SPD. Again, we all saw the video where the statement was made, quote, the police are on our side in Springfield, and in reference, quote, just hit them. We heard speakers tonight. Don't bring that crap into our neighborhoods. First Amendment right test to all people, and it's a felony violation of rights to suppress that right. From an observer, SPD sure gave the appearance of being on the side of suppression. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Shay Gallagher Starr. And Shay, if you unmute your microphone, you're good to go.
Thank you, Neil. And thank you for being here and conducting this investigation, Rick. I also live in the neighborhood in which this event occurred. And I participated in the march led by Black Unity, along with my then 13-year-old son. And he will be sending you an email to share his experience of the police department's response as well. It wasn't positive, and he's expressed increased fear of police since that time, especially since seeing Tashawn pulled out of the crowd behind the barricade and beaten repeatedly on the head. I want to tell you about the many opportunities for avoiding conflict and de-escalation which I observed and which SPD bypassed. The first being the gathering in Jessie Main Park. People gathered over the course of an hour, sitting in small groups around the park in the July sunshine. It was broad daylight. Officers could not only have spoken to leaders regarding their concerns about the march ending up on Main Street, they could also have talked with many participants regarding those concerns and their plans for public safety. Intersections along the march route were the same way. This was a slow-moving procession, parts of which stopped to have dialogues with residents along the way, actual dialogues, conversation. SPD could have contacted the now clearly identified march leaders and discussed their concerns and plans for barricades. Police could have moved known white nationalists away from the barricades, especially members of the American Patriot Society, or TAPS. SPD knows who these individuals are. Many of them have been arrested multiple times. In fact, as we found out later from live streamed video, SPD officers colluded with these members of TAPS, telling them what direction the march was being directed and allowing them to gather both beside and behind their barricades and in the street police were trying to direct protesters into. With regard to public safety, SPD could have prevented injuries by escorting marchers back to the park and staying there as a protective presence as people left. Instead of intervening with a goal of de-escalation at any point during 2 hours, SPD created a win-lose scenario for march participants in reach of militant white nationalists, many of whom had come armed with everything from guns to wasp spray. SPD created a situation which justified to their minds a violent use of force. And you've seen the results of that management in the many videos you've been reviewing. I'm going to skip to the end of my statement here because of time to say, prior to the time that demonstrators met police officers in riot gear and armed white nationalists, there was no violence. There was no trespassing, no littering, no vandalism. And what my neighbors have expressed so much fear of was no more than a crowd of people chanting and walking through their streets, led by Black people and full of their own neighbors of all races marching in support of them. Thank you.
Rick, our next speaker is Jay Brown.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi, this is Jay Brown. First, I would like to address that I was an independent journalist at the time. However, of course, I do play another role in this movement, but at this specific moment, I was an independent journalist. Now, I want to speak on the specific, sorry, it's very triggering to me right now because this incident was horrific. I was in Springfield, which you have received video that I did not send, but it is public knowledge, so a lot of people sent it in. There was an officer by the name of Kendricks, Officer Kendricks, specifically denied me access to the other side of the street. His reasoning was because I was a Black woman. I know. Because I was a Black woman, he said that my side hated police officers, and therefore he cannot allow me to go to the other side of the street. Now, there were counter protesters there who were egging the police officers on to allow me over to the side of the street. Because I'm an independent journalist, I am very neutral in the situation during my journalism. Now, the counter protesters were even asking the police officer, hey, why is she not allowed over here? Why are you denying her? And they said bluntly, which has been sent to you, because she is Black, her side hates police. I want to make that very clear to you that he specifically said because I was Black that I was not allowed across the street. And his name is Officer Kendricks of the SPD. Then Officer Durant, who also assaulted a woman 3 times, hitting her in the face and dragging her by her hair, he also denied me access to, across the barrier because I was Black. Once again, he says that my group screams ACAB. Mind you, when I am an independent journalist, my job is to stay neutral. That's exactly what I did. I work in a field where I need to stay regulated 100% of the time. That's exactly what I did. Now, once again, the video has been sent to you. These were his direct words. Following this incident, Officer Kendrick has responded to my house personally And because he identified me as a BLM member, he wrote a falsified documentation and a falsified police report, making me an aggressor in a police report. 75, sorry, I do have legal representation here and witnesses due to the extent of this incident. The officers have now harassed me due to the events that took place in Thurston. There were many officers who were hitting people. There were many officers who had harassed people. It's disgusting. It is disgusting. And just to clarify something that a counter protester said earlier, disturbance does not mean destruction. Disturbance is the unsettling of a peaceful environment. Your environment is not peaceful when they hang a noose in a tree. Also, police officers harassing Black people and people of color is not peaceful. SPD has shown multiple times that they do not care for Black people by dragging them, by assaulting them, for being peaceful in a neighborhood. So the harassment I have now encountered because of my presence in the Thurston event, which I will still and always show up for these events because, friendly reminder, Black lives matter and all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter. Oh, also, Tim Davis, you can suck my ass. The other person, you can suck my ass.
So our next speaker is Amy Cawthron. And Rick, we have, we're going to go over on time. We have about 7 speakers. Would you be able to stay so we could get all 7? Would you mind?
No, not at all. I'll stay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Amy, and then if we could keep it to 3 minutes, we'll make sure we get these last 7 speakers in. And Amy, if you unmute your microphone, you should be good to go.
All right, thank you. First, I would like to say that I am a Thurston resident and I do live and work in Thurston. I'm also a veteran. Reflecting on the incidents on that night in Thurston, the word that keeps coming to my mind is inevitable. The actions of SPD leading up to this event made it so that no other possibility than violence was going to happen within our community. At previous protests in Springfield, on multiple occasions, they had kettled protesters, they had harassed protesters, they had tried to intimidate protesters. Doing these types of things and showing such brazen support for one side versus another does not allow for free speech, does not allow for people to let their voice be heard. And when voices cannot be heard verbally, they will be heard through violence. Whether that's right or not, that's just the way the world works. Showing up to that protest that night, the people in the neighborhood did not seem fearful. If anything, it seemed like a block party. There were multiple people standing around, drinking, talking, having a good time. So most of these people who say that they were fearful, their actions showed otherwise. As the night went on, of course, we did go to the barrier. I don't think I really need to say much more than that. But as we were heading back, the scariest moment of the night for me was when a red pickup truck pulled up and about 6 counter-protesters jumped out of the back with weapons. I was appalled and disgusted to find later that these people were directed to this location by SPD. Continuing back to the park, I quickly left. Being transgender, I know that I am a target to a lot of these different people, and I did not want to give them the opportunity to hurt me. But as I got there, there was clear favoritism. This group of SPD has shown clear favoritism from one side to the other. They claim to block 126 for reasons of safety, but in the coming weeks and months, multiple times they blocked that very same road for quote unquote patriots having their own parades. The actions of SPD are absolutely disgusting, and I got lost there. Actions of SPD are disgusting, and their continued their continued horrible actions will continue to cause violence within these communities if they do not change their ways. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Rick, is Sean Harag, and we appreciate everyone keeping to the time so we can get to these last few speakers. Shauna?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you for your time. That I live in the neighborhood that this event actually took place. I have worked within emergency medical services and lived in this community for over 20 years. But I was there in support of Black Lives Matter. I don't think I need to go over anything that happened at the barricade. I'll speak to what happened to my 16-year-old daughter who was there. She was marching along and had a water bottle thrown at her head or into the crowd by one of the counter protesters. And at the time that that happened, the person who threw it was standing directly next to a police officer. Again, the biggest problem that I have, I wasn't at the barricade, so I can't speak to that. We've all seen the videos, was the absolutely brazen disregard for safety of the protesters when they were in retreat, trying to leave. Not speaking to this event, but an event that happened then in October. Again, the same people that were at that protest that exacted violence again when we came back to Springfield. My daughter and I were sprayed with mace by one of the counter protesters while in a vehicle. So I just hope that your investigation does something to hold these police accountable, not only for their actions at protesters, but their inactions and the unwillingness to intervene, to actually help and protect. The First Amendment gives you rights for both sides. So I understand that the other side has a right to protest too and to have a counter protesters, but the police in role is to actually provide safety and between two opposing sides when they are bringing their First Amendment rights to the street. And they have not done that. It is absolutely false to say that they were protecting protesters by making that barricade when that actually caused them to violently react to the protesters and to increase the violence that happened as they actually retreated from that barricade. They used police on one side, counter protesters on the other side in a practice called kettling, which actually provides no safety for anybody within that circle and no ability to actually follow orders. So I yield my time. Thank you.
Rick, our next speaker is Thomas Lawrence. Thomas, let's try your microphone again and see if we can get you.
Hey, is that working now?
We hear you.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you for coming back to me. At this point, pretty much everything that I was going to say has been covered. Luckily for all of us, we all have cameras, and since Springfield PD doesn't, we're able to record what goes on for ourselves. I would just like to try as best I can to be very impartial about which side of the argument I'm on, although it'll probably be pretty obvious as I get going. But I would like to speak about a couple days before this whole started, when there was an officer interacting with, I believe, the neighbor who lives across the street from the house in question. She is a BIPOC family person who lives right there. And there was a member, I believe, of Black Unity in the car with her. And a Springfield police officer was called to ask, like, what's going on? Why are you here? First off, he was very dismissive when her answer was, like, I live here. But then he actually got on the phone and called the person who lived there. And I can't say exactly the quote, but the gist of his sentence on camera right in front of her was, you know how these cancel culture people are. They just try to ruin lives. This is how they act on camera. And again, they don't have their own body cameras, so it's only up to us to show the obvious double standard here as far as how they respond when they know they are being watched. This is how much they know Chief Lewis and the rest of the people in charge aren't going to do anything about it. I believe we've had 4 different lawsuits in the last decade or so that have been settled regarding police brutality of people of color, one very recently, and I believe it was the largest settlement in state history, but I could be a little off on the details there. This was the lead up to the event. Someone just recently said this was inevitable. Yeah, it was inevitable because police have already decided which side they're on when it comes to which neighborhood they're going to defend, which side they are going to react appropriately to. Just earlier this week at the Springfield City Council meeting, I spoke about an interaction where a group of ALM Patriot people were going to go up to Salem and protest the freeze, and a police officer, again on camera, told a couple people asking, like, why are you not stopping these people? He said, and I quote, Sergeant Lewis has told us we're not going to intervene with this and enforce the governor's order. And he said these people have a permit, which of course they did not have. That was a blatant lie. And yeah, there's the whole picture for you. I say, obviously, there's nothing else I can say that hasn't already been seen or sent to you. But I did also send you a picture of the house in question regarding the Halloween decoration. And I would invite everybody, if you go look up the house right now, Google Maps Street View will show you that that skeleton is there year round. But at the time of the incident, or a couple weeks prior to the time of the incident, or whenever that Google Maps picture was taken, that skeleton was not hanging by a noose. It was sitting on a tree branch. That definitely was a change that happened around the time that the BIPOC family moved in across the street. Thank you for your time.
All right, our next speaker is Ashley Feneson, and we have 4 speakers left. And Rick, we appreciate you hanging out so we can make sure the last 4 speakers have a moment to speak. And Ashley, I think you're self-muted. There you go.
Hi, I first want to say Black Lives Matter. We all know what actually happened. There is video evidence of the situation. I was there. Sorry, I wasn't even planning on speaking. I just want to point out that leaving the protest when I was finally able to get into my car, which was blocked by patriots, yelling terrible things. I was next to a person of color vet who was who they're yelling terrible things to. I was, on the ground with a woman who was bear maced by someone. And as I look around for help, there's 2 motorcycle officers sitting at the top of the street, just watching this whole thing. So it's very, very obvious what side they've chosen. And sorry, going back to what I was saying, when I was leaving, my car was front row instant of a situation where a woman on All Lives Matter side shoved another woman down to the ground and left there to bleed. And what was super upsetting with this situation was that the police took about 20 seconds just to calmly walk over there, did not use any force, any arrest to the other side of the woman who assaulted this elderly woman, calmly walked them to the other side and let them go. She was later arrested, but it kind of shows how the protesters were handled against actual All Lives Matter people who were actually assaulting people, and how calmly they were and did nothing to that extent. So I just am asking you to please actually look over the videos. There's evidence they did not handle the situation well. They should not have assaulted him or punched him consistent over and over in the face. None of that. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm scrambled. I'm just really frustrated, and I hope that you can watch the evidence and take care of it, because SPD did not at all handle that and should not have happened that way. We're just trying to protest calmly. I've been to plenty of Black Unity protests. None of them had ended in violence or anything. They're doing so much for the community. So yeah, that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Rick, we're down to our last 3 speakers, and we appreciate you keeping to the time. Thank you. Our next speaker is AA.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I was previously a resident of Thurston, but I moved away on July 30th. The reason why I moved away was because my neighbor hung a noose in his yard, and I was afraid for my children's lives. You all know who I am. You all saw Officer Joe Burke, badge number 365, harass me in front of my house. In reviewing the live stream later, I realized that I had told him over 9 times that I was a resident on that street and not someone there to just harass my neighbor with the BLM mob movement. My children are traumatized. I am traumatized. I've had to go into hiding, and my children are no longer allowed to go outside alone anymore. I live with so much guilt for having told anyone that my neighbor hung the noose. The guilt is crippling and it hurts and it shakes me to my core. But what I want to know is why no official wants to speak to me. What are you all afraid of? I'm done talking.
Rick, our next speaker is Anthony Smith. And Anthony, you might have to unmute on your side.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. So I was not the actual protest, but I've been involved with it from the beginning, all the way from, Eugene riots, all the way through, and following it in support of Black Lives Matter and Black Unity. I want to again accredit them for being great young Black leaders that do wonderful things for the community, and I think they deserve that credit. My only thing I wanted to come here and say, and I've heard a lot, and I think it's very important that it's well understood that in the fact that they were within their constitutional rights and they were fulfilling what they felt necessary to get their message across, walking down a public street, and then they come across the barrier. And I want to make it very, very clear that they already knew when they got to that barrier, the police, who were the leaders of Black Unity, and they were targeted. Like, they were literally targeted. When that first hand went across that barrier, that was police interaction. And the only thing that these protesters were able to do and Black Unity was able to do is to protect one another from the senseless violence that the Springfield police officers at that moment were coming across that barrier to do harm to them, to protect one another. And I will tell you flat out that the violence that occurred in that, and what I later on, which I later on saw firsthand of what happened that evening for fact, was horrible and horrific. And specifically in the instance that they had, like, Tyshawn was definitely was targeted, and some others were targeted, and the violence that their bodies accrued from what it was unnecessary. The amount of wounds that were suffered, I just think be better humans. I think that I couldn't believe that they did what they did, and after watching all the films and all of it, that they would have allowed part of the community that was against what these people were trying to accomplish. They should have let them just walk. Putting a barrier up, set it up, that was the bottom line. They knew what was going to happen, and they did it on purpose, and they deserve to be called out for that. It has, if they would have let them walk instead of making dumb excuses about Main Street, they would have just let them walk, finished it, none of that would have occurred. If they would have just been able to keep moving. Stopping them and pushing them back was the wrong answer, was the wrong thing to do, because they knew what they were doing, obviously. But I really think you should be looked at hardcore about the violence that was accrued upon individuals that were just doing what they have a right to do. And once again, I love you, Black Unity, and everything you do. Keep standing up. Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
All right, Rick, our last speaker is, pull her up in just a second, but remember, if you don't get a chance to speak this evening, you can send a written audio or video message to Rick at the email listed here on the slide. And our last speaker is Curry Gill. And Curry, you should be ready to go.
Thank you. Thanks so much for this forum and for having this investigation take place. Just as sort of follow-up to this, I know that there will be a report. I am curious to know what the next steps are, if there are particular officers that are noted for excessive force, what actions will come of that. I look forward to some very clear recommendations. I think regardless of the results in the area of excessive force, what you talked about presenting to City Council was that you would look at all kinds of recommendations for improvements, and you mentioned that at the beginning of this meeting. So I hope to see that. I think that there's always room for improvement and to make change so people can say their piece in this community and be treated fairly, and having very clear, specific recommendations in regards to disciplinary action if that is warranted, and training and change in practice will be very helpful for the city in the long term. Thank you.
Rick, those are our speakers for this evening that we have in the queue.
Perfect. I just want to thank everybody for one, hanging in, particularly those speakers at the end to wait all the way through it. We've got over 30 people that were willing to engage. I really appreciate that.
I was still wanting to talk. Can you hear me? Can I have my moment of explanation? Hello?
I'm sorry, I just don't see the name. Who would this?
Right, see my wave? I waved like 2 hours ago.
Okay, give me just a moment. Let me track you down. What was your name?
Sarah Brach or JB, I'm not sure, probably Sarah Brach.
Okay. Okay, I don't see it, but please go ahead and have 3 minutes.
Okay, awesome, thank you. I'm gonna skip some stuff that I wrote down. I think what I most wanna say is there was literally not one protester that came to Thurston with intentions to riot in any form or manner. Every single person came with peaceful intentions to stand up for equality, to support the BIPOC community. We all came to march, sing, educate, and do it also lawfully. Lawfully. We ignored irate patriots who followed our group, taunting and harassing us the entire way until we arrived at the police barricade, where the police refused to let us pass, later claiming it was for our protection. Then unlawfully declared us a riot. I say unlawfully with great confidence, considering we followed the law regarding protesting. We stayed in the street. We did not block traffic. We stayed off sidewalks, did not block paths or driveways, and every word that was spoke by our group was spoken with intent to justify our presence and mission. So someone tell me what was riotous about our behavior and show the evidence to prove it, please. And you know what? I'm going to stop there. I have a whole nother page, but it's too much. I'm going to pay it forward or whatever the word is. I appreciate the moment. Thank you.
Okay, Rick, I think again, we thank everyone for their patience while we go through this clunky webinar. I think Sarah's name was coming up as Thomas Lawrence, which is why we couldn't get Thomas at the very beginning. So those are all of our speakers.
Thanks, Neil. And then kind of Sarah mentioned she had more to say, and I just want to remind people of the email address below that's on your screen, the RBC.
I had this, I thought we would be done by now. Hold on just one moment.
So just remind people we've got the email there. So if you've got additional information or others that want to share, please feel free. And if you want to share video or audio files that are too big to email, then just shoot me an email and we can coordinate how to pull that off of a shared drive somewhere, either yours or mine. So I just want to thank you for all your input. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone who came to the forum this evening. I appreciate all of your comments. I believe that you are all, speaking from your heart, and I appreciate your participation tonight. We will continue to work with Rick as he finalizes his investigation and does his subsequent report. And then we will be getting back in touch with the community and talking about what our next steps will be. Everybody, please be safe. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to please also follow COVID guidelines right now. So thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.